Hello again, it's Martin here from R2 Electrical. In this video we're going to be showing you how to change a normal on-off switch to a dimmer. So here we have a mock-up of pretty much what's in most households where you have a on-off switch that turns the light on and off. And this is what we're aiming for, a dimmer that you push to turn on. You turn the knob up to increase the brightness and down to turn it down and push it again to turn it off. Now it's really important that you don't electrocute yourself, so you've got to make sure that you isolate the supply. So when you take the old switch off, that it's not actually live. So the first thing we need to do is to go to the consumer unit or the fuse box and turn off the circuit that we're actually going to be working on. The first thing we need to do is to locate the consumer unit, or fuse box as it's often called. Many of them, like this one, has a pull down flap at the front and reveals inside the various circuit breakers. So if we take a closer look here, the one that's highlighted has got the label lights, which gives us a good indication that that's the lighting circuit. And also, if you look, it says B6, which is the rating of the circuit breaker, which is 6 amps, which is normally associated with lighting circuits. So now we can turn off the circuit breaker, like so. And as an electrician, we want to make sure that no one else turns it back on by mistake. So we put on this locking tool with a label on it, make sure nobody else can turn it back on and electrocute me. So now we're ready to go back and take the screws off. And I'll speed up a little bit here because it's a bit boring to see someone unscrewing screws. There we go. And the other one. And take it off, gently making sure you don't touch any of the screws behind, and we're ready to check to make sure it is in fact isolated. To do that, we use an approved voltage indicator. First of all, we test to make sure it's working okay, which it is. We then measure between the earth and the incoming live to make sure that is dead, which it is, and then against the other L1 terminal, which it is, and then we test again between the two terminals. All checks out okay, and then we test the machine again to make sure it's still working, which it is. That means it's safely isolated and ready for the next step. So before we move on, we can have a look at the two switches, the older on-off switch on the left and the dimmer switch on the right, by sort of turning them over and looking at what we can see. It's a little bit difficult on the left to see how it's marked, but they are top left L1 and the top right is L2, and the one down the middle is actually labeled L. Sometimes it can be labeled common or with a little icon, which I'll show you in a minute. So here on the right, we've got the dimmer switch, which is labeled as L2, as you can see on the left, L1, sort of bottom right, and then the middle, it's got a little squiggle icon, which also represents live. So if we go back to the switch we've just taken off, we'll notice that the solid brown upper wire there feeds into the live of the switch, and the blue wire, which has got the brown sleeving on, goes into the L1. Now the sleeving is to say that this is a switched live connection, not a neutral blue connection. So now we know everything's isolated and what is what, we can just take a screwdriver and unscrew the terminals to remove, in this case, the switched live, and then the incoming live like so. And there we have it. So we're ready to put the dimmer switch on now. So we take the dimmer and put the live into the incoming live connection of the dimmer switch, making sure it's nice and tight and we're not having any copper wires showing. Do the same with the switch live into L1 and tighten it up. Give it a little tug to make sure it's secure, and we're ready to put the front back on. It's good to bend the wires just a little bit so they sort of fold into themselves. Pop it on like so, and we're ready to put the screws in. So take the screws and pop them back in using a screwdriver. And then we're ready to go back to the consumer unit to turn everything back on again. So first thing, to remove the safety isolation device, like so. Then we'll turn the circuit breaker back on and just close the front, and we should be done at the consumer unit. So back to our test switch now. We can push it to turn the LED bulb on, up and down to control the brightness, and push it again to turn off. So job done. So before I finish, just a few helpful notes. Number one, of course, make sure it's safe to work on the switch. Always isolate and always check to make sure the circuit has been isolated. Number two, make sure that the dimmers are suitable for the type of lighting that you've got. For example, make sure that the power rating of the dimmer is appropriate for the type of lights that you're using. Make sure if you're using LED lights that the dimmers are suitable for LEDs. And thirdly, make sure that they physically fit into the box because dimmer switches are often quite deep, deeper than the traditional switches that you may have taken off. Thirdly, take note of the old connections on the switch. A good way of doing that is simply to take a photo with your smartphone. Just make sure that when you're putting the cables back in, they go into the right place. Number four, don't be too worried about dual or triple switches, replacing those with dual or triple dimmers. It's exactly the same. You essentially treat each single one as an individual switch. And remember, working with electricity is extremely dangerous. So if you're in any doubt whatsoever what you're doing, do consult an electrician. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video.